There's something parents do that's worse than physical abuse, worse than material neglect, even worse than complete absence. It's something so subtle, so socially accepted, so normalized that most people don't even realize when it's happening. But once you understand what it is, once you see the damage it causes, you'll never look at childhood the same way again. Carl Jung called it soul murder, and he wasn't using a metaphor. He was being literal. Because there's something inside a child that Jung referred to as the soul, not in a religious sense, but in a psychological sense. The soul is the vital center. It's the part of the child that feels, that wants, that needs, that is. It's the living core of a human being. And when parents do this one specific thing, they don't just hurt the child. They kill that core. They destroy the soul. And the thing they do, the number one cause of narcissism, according to Jung, is this: they treat the child's emotions as inconveniences, as problems, as things that need to be fixed, controlled, or eliminated. Let me show you how this works. Because it's not obvious. It's not like parents directly say, your feelings are a problem. It's much more subtle, much more insidious. And it's happening in millions of homes right now. A 4-year-old Lily wakes up in the middle of the night. She had a nightmare. She's scared. Calls for her mom, Sarah. Sarah comes in, annoyed at being woken up, and says, "It was nothing, just a dream, go back to sleep," and leaves, closing the door, leaving Lily alone in the dark, with the fear that supposedly doesn't exist. What just happened? Lily had a real emotional experience, fear. And Sarah not only didn't validate that fear, she denied its existence. She treated the fear as an inconvenience, as something that was disrupting her sleep. And the implicit message to Lily was clear. Your feelings are problems. Your feelings bother me. Your feelings need to stop. Now imagine this happening not once, but 1,000 times, 10,000 times, over years. Every time the child expresses sadness, she hears, "Stop crying." Every time she expresses anger, she hears, "Go to your room until you calm down." Every time she expresses fear, she hears, "There's nothing to be afraid of." Every time she expresses exuberant joy, she hears, "Settle down, you're being too loud." What's being taught here? That emotions are inconvenient, that feeling is problematic, that the child's function isn't to have an authentic emotional life. It's to not bother the adults. It's to not create work. It's to not exist emotionally. And when a child learns this, when this message is repeated so many times that it becomes the core programming of the psyche, something inside them dies. Jung called this soul murder because the soul is exactly this. It's the ability to feel, to want, to be alive internally. And when you teach a child that their inner life is a problem, you're not just invalidating some feelings, you're killing their very ability to feel real. This creates narcissism in a very specific way, because the child doesn't stop having emotions. Emotions can't be eliminated. They keep coming up. But now, the child has learned that emotions are enemies. They are things that need to be controlled, hidden, denied. So, they develop a brutal internal split. There's what they really feel, and there's what they can show. And the distance between these two becomes an abyss. On the outside, they become exactly what the parents wanted: calm, controlled, problem-free. On the inside, there's a chaos of denied, suppressed feelings that they don't even know how to access anymore. And over time, they identify with the external mask, with the controlled persona, and completely forget that there's a real person underneath. A person with feelings, with needs, with a soul. That's narcissism, not in the sense of loving yourself too much, but in the sense of having lost complete contact with who you really are. of having built an entire identity based on not feeling, on not bothering anyone, on not being a problem, and then spending your life defending this false identity against anything that threatens to reveal the emptiness that exists underneath. Jung said that every child is born with a soul, born connected with their own inner life. A baby isn't ashamed to cry. A toddler isn't ashamed to laugh loudly. They simply are, simply feel, simply express. That's the soul in action. It's life living through the child without filters, without shame, without fear. But when parents treat this expression as inconvenient, something changes. The child starts to internalize that there's something wrong with them, not with the parents, not with the way the parents respond, but with them, with the fact that they feel, that they need, that they exist emotionally. And here's the greatest cruelty. Parents who do this rarely have bad intentions. They don't wake up thinking, "Today I'm going to destroy my child's soul." They're just tired, busy, overwhelmed, and the child's emotions are in fact inconvenient. Their work, their demand, they're things that need time, attention, energy that the parents already don't have. So they do what seems most efficient. They try to make the child stop feeling, stop crying, settle down. It's nothing. You're fine. And in their minds, they're helping. They're teaching the child to be strong, to not be dramatic, to handle things. But what they're really doing is something else. They're teaching the child that emotions are enemies, that feeling is weakness, that the solution to emotional discomfort isn't to process, understand, validate. It's to suppress, deny, hide. And a child who learns this doesn't become strong. They become disconnected. They develop a frightening ability to not feel what they're feeling, to deny their own internal experience, to live completely on the surface. While the inner world rots from lack of attention, I'll give you a more subtle example, because most people think it's okay if they don't yell at the child, if they don't punish the child for crying. But soul murder happens in much more subtle ways. A 7-year-old Ethan comes home from school upset. A friend was mean to him. He tells his dad, David, his eyes filled with tears. And David, wanting to help, says, "Oh, he was probably just having a bad day. Don't take it to heart. It'll be fine tomorrow." And goes back to looking at his phone. What just happened? David didn't yell, didn't punish, didn't tell Ethan to stop crying. But he did something equally destructive. He didn't see the pain. He minimized it. He offered a rational explanation that completely ignored Ethan's emotional experience. And the implicit message was, your pain isn't important enough for me to stop what I'm doing and really connect with you. Your pain is something to be solved quickly and left behind. And the child learns. The child learns that when they're suffering, the appropriate response isn't to feel and process. It's to rationalize and minimize. It's to find an explanation that makes the pain go away without having to actually feel it. And this becomes their strategy for the rest of their life. Every time something hurts, they don't feel, they explain, justify, minimize, and become increasingly distant from their own emotional experience. This is soul murder in action, and it's happening in families that seem perfectly normal, where there's no abuse, no obvious neglect. But there's this subtle absence, this inability or unwillingness of the parents to really connect with the child's emotional life. Carl Jung said that the soul needs a witness. It needs someone who sees what you're feeling and says, "I see you. It's real. It's important. You're not alone in this." When a child has that, when their emotions are witnessed and validated regularly, they develop something fundamental. They develop the ability to be a witness for themselves, to feel something and say, This is real, this matters, I can hold this. But when a child never has their emotions witnessed, when every time they feel something, they encounter denial, minimization, or irritation, they don't develop that internal capacity. Instead, they develop the opposite, an internal voice that constantly invalidates what they feel, that says, "That's not real, you're exaggerating, get over it, don't be weak." This internal voice becomes an internal perpetrator. The child internalizes the parent's attitude and starts doing to themselves what the parents did to them. They become their own emotional enemy. And they spend their life running from their own feelings, because feeling activates that cruel voice that says they're being dramatic, weak, problematic. And here's how this specifically creates narcissism. When you can't feel your own feelings, you lose access to what Carl Jung called the true self. The true self is built around authentic emotional experience. It's who you are when no one is looking. It's what you really want, need, feel, love. But if you spent your childhood learning that your feelings are problems, you don't have access to this true self. So, you build a false self, a self based not on what you feel, but on what you should look like, on what works, on what doesn't bother anyone, on what keeps you safe, and this false self becomes your identity. You identify with the mask, with the persona, and you defend that persona with everything you have. Because underneath it, there's nothing but a terrifying void, a void where your soul should be, where your capacity to feel, want, be, should be. Narcissists are people who defend the false self because they've lost the true self. And they lost the true self because their parents treated their emotions as inconveniences, as problems, as things that needed to be eliminated instead of welcomed. The pattern is always the same. The child feels, the parents can't or won't hold that feeling, so they try to make the feeling go away. Stop crying, you're fine, it's nothing. And the child learns that feelings are dangerous, that expressing them is risky, that the only way to maintain love and approval from their parents is to not have emotional needs. And that child grows up and becomes an adult who seems extremely self-sufficient, who never asks for help, who never shows vulnerability, who seems to need no one. And people might even admire this. They might call it strength, independence, resilience, but inside, this person is dying of loneliness because they never learned that it's safe to need, that it's safe to feel, that real connection comes from vulnerability, not from appearing like you have everything under control. They're trapped in a fortress. They built to protect themselves from feelings they learned were unacceptable, and that fortress keeps them safe. But it also keeps them completely isolated, completely disconnected from themselves and others. This is what Jung meant by soul murder. The soul is your capacity to feel and express authentically. And when parents treat that expression as an inconvenience, they're not just teaching bad emotional habits, they're killing something essential. They're teaching the child that who they really are, with all their messy feelings and inconvenient needs, is unacceptable, and that they need to become someone else, someone easier, more controlled, more convenient. And the child obeys because they don't have a choice, because love and survival depend on parental approval, so they kill their own soul, bury their feelings so deep that they forget they exist, and they build a new identity based on being what the parents want, on not being a problem, on not bothering anyone. And decades later, when that person is sitting in a therapist's office saying that they feel empty, that life doesn't make sense, that they've achieved everything but feel nothing, what they're really saying is, my soul was murdered when I was too little to defend it. And now, I don't know how to bring it back. I don't even know if there's anything left to bring back. Carl Jung observed that the deepest wounds don't come from what parents actively do. They come from what they don't do. They come from the absence, the lack of emotional presence, the inability to witness the child in their suffering, their joy, their anger, their fear, everything they are. And when you grow up without that witness, without someone who sees what you feel and says that it's valid and important, you don't learn that you matter. You learn the opposite, that your feelings are inconvenient, that your internal experience is a burden, that you would be more lovable, more acceptable, better, if you simply didn't feel so much. I'm going to give you one more example, because this is so common that most people don't even realize when they're doing it. A 5-year-old, let's call him Ryan, is working on a jigsaw puzzle. He's frustrated because a piece won't fit. He starts to cry. His mom, let's call her Sarah, comes over and says, "No need to cry, honey. Let me show you where it goes." And she quickly solves the problem. And Ryan stops crying, and Sarah feels good about having helped. But look at what really happened. Ryan was having an experience of frustration, and instead of Sarah helping him to process the frustration, to name the feeling, to learn that frustration is uncomfortable but not dangerous, Sarah eliminated the cause of the frustration, solved the puzzle, and unintentionally taught something terrible. She taught that the solution to uncomfortable feelings isn't to feel through them. It's to eliminate the situation that caused them, and that child grows up and becomes an adult who can't tolerate emotional discomfort. Every time she feels frustration, anxiety, sadness, she needs to do something to eliminate the feeling immediately. Eat, drink, work, shop, anything to avoid having to feel. Because she never learned that feelings pass, that you can feel something uncomfortable and survive. That emotions aren't emergencies that need to be resolved. This is a subtle aspect of soul murder. It's not just actively invalidating a child's emotions. It's also solving the problems causing those emotions for them. Instead of letting her learn that she can feel frustration and still keep trying, that she can feel sadness and still be okay. That emotions are a normal part of life, not crises that require immediate intervention. Parents who do this think they're being loving. And on some level, they are. They want the child to stop suffering, but what they're really doing is depriving the child of the opportunity to develop emotional tolerance, the ability to feel difficult things and not panic, to know that you can get through discomfort and come out the other side. And when you don't develop this capacity in childhood, you spend your adult life avoiding any situation that might generate emotional discomfort. You don't take risks. You don't open up. You're not vulnerable because vulnerability hurts, and you never learn that emotional pain won't destroy you, that you can feel and survive. This creates a specific type of narcissism, the narcissism of perfectionism, of the need to control everything, of never showing weakness, because weakness means feeling, and feeling means being out of control. And being out of control means reliving that childhood terror of having emotions that no one could handle, that everyone wanted to eliminate. So the person develops a facade of absolute control. She seems to have it all together, everything planned, everything under control, but inside, she's terrified. Terrified that if she relaxes, if she feels, if she's human for a second, everything will fall apart. Because she never learned that it's safe to fall apart, that you can break into pieces, and someone will be there to hold those pieces. Jung said that the soul develops through relationship, not through isolation. A child doesn't discover who she is by looking inward. She discovers who she is through mirroring, through expressing something and seeing it reflected back in the eyes of someone who matters. I see you. What you're feeling is real. You matter. When this happens 1,000 times, the child internalizes this capacity. She learns to see herself, to validate her own experience, to know that what she feels is real and important, even when no one else is around. She develops a strong soul, a solid inner presence. But when it doesn't happen, when the child expresses and finds emptiness, or worse, irritation, she doesn't develop that inner presence. She develops an inner void, a place where the ability to self-validate should be, to self-comfort, to be your own compassionate witness. And that void is terrifying. So the person spends her life trying to fill it with external things, achievements, recognition, admiration, status, always seeking outside what should have been installed inside in childhood, the basic feeling that she matters, that what she feels is real, that she is worthy of love simply for existing, not for performing. This is narcissism, and it has its direct origin in treating the child's emotions as inconveniences, as problems, as things that need to be fixed or eliminated, instead of welcomed and validated. The greatest tragedy is that most parents who do this are repeating what was done to them. They also had their emotions treated as inconveniences. They also learned that feeling is weak. They also developed a whole psychological structure based on not feeling. So when their children feel, when they cry, when they need, it activates in the parent all the discomfort that they themselves never learned to process. The child's emotions become a mirror, reflecting back to them everything they buried. And the automatic response is to make the child stop, not because the child's emotion is really a problem, but because it's activating something in the parent that they don't know how to handle. This is the generational cycle. Emotionally disconnected parents create emotionally disconnected children who become emotionally disconnected parents. And with each generation, the soul gets more buried, more forgotten, more distant, until someone stops and looks and sees the pattern and decides to break it, decides to learn what was never taught, to feel, to validate, to be present with discomfort, to witness their own pain with compassion instead of with judgment, and slowly, painfully, begins to resurrect the soul that was buried for so long that she didn't even remember it existed. Now, if you're watching this and recognize this pattern, if you see your childhood reflected here, the first thing you need to understand is that this is not your fault. You didn't choose to bury your soul. You were forced to do it to survive, to maintain some connection with your parents, to not be completely rejected for having emotional needs. A child cannot self-validate alone. She needs adults to do it for her, and when those adults can't, or won't, when they treat emotions as inconveniences, the child has no option but to adapt, to become who she needs to be in order to not lose the little bit of love that's available. So you developed narcissism not because you're vain or selfish, but because you were taught that who you really are was not acceptable, that your feelings were problems, that you needed to be different, less emotional, easier, more convenient. And you learned that lesson so well that you became an expert in not feeling, in keeping it all together, in appearing strong, in never showing weakness. And people might even admire that. They might say you're resilient, strong, independent. But you know the truth. You know that behind that facade there's a terrifying void, a place where there should be a real person, with real feelings, with real needs. But instead there are just survival strategies, defense mechanisms. Ways to avoid having to feel what you were never taught was safe to feel. And this void manifests in specific ways in relationships. Because you can't be truly present with another person if you can't be present with yourself. You can't witness someone else's pain if you never learn to witness your own pain. So you choose partners who are also emotionally disconnected, where there's an implicit agreement, I won't feel too much, and you don't either. Let's stay safe through superficiality. And when one of them tries to go deeper, tries to have more emotional intimacy, you freak out, because real intimacy requires vulnerability, and vulnerability means feeling. And you've been programmed your whole life to believe that feeling is dangerous, or that you choose partners who are very emotional, and then you resent them because they do to you what your parents did. They expect you to hold their emotions, that you be a witness, that you validate. But you never learned how to do that, so you repeat the pattern. You treat their emotions as inconveniences, as problems, and the relationship becomes a reenactment of your childhood, with you in the role of your parents. Or you oscillate between extremes, between cold and hot partners, never finding balance, never being able to be in a relationship where emotions are allowed, but not overwhelming, where you can be human, without being afraid of being rejected for it, because no one taught you that it's possible to feel and still be okay, that you can have needs and still be loved, that vulnerability isn't weakness, it's humanity, and humanity is what creates real connection. Carl Jung had a concept called individuation. It's the process of becoming who you really are, of stopping living through masks and starting to live through the soul, the true self. And for someone who had their soul murdered in childhood, individuation means something very specific. It means resurrecting what was buried. It means learning, as an adult, what you should have learned as a child, that your feelings are valid, that you matter, that it's safe to be yourself. According to Jung, this is the path to wholeness. And how do you do that? How do you resurrect a soul? First, you stop doing to yourself what your parents did. You stop treating your own feelings as inconveniences. When you feel sadness, instead of immediately trying to eliminate the feeling, you pause. You sit with it. You ask, what is this sadness trying to tell me? And you listen, not to solve, not to fix, just to listen. This is the most revolutionary practice there is. Simply feeling what you're feeling without judging, without trying to change, without trying to eliminate. Just being present with your own emotional experience. Like Dr. Phil always says, how's that working for you? If suppressing your feelings worked, you wouldn't be here. And in the beginning, it's going to seem impossible, because you've been trained your whole life to run from feelings. So when you allow yourself to feel, the impulse will be enormous to distract, to do something, or just to escape. But if you can stay there, even if for 30 seconds, something starts to change. You start to realize that feelings aren't dangerous. They're just sensations in the body, uncomfortable, yes, but not lethal. You're not going to die from feeling sadness. You're not going to crumble from feeling anger. You're not going to disappear from feeling fear. And when you learn that, when you develop this ability to be with your own feelings, you're doing for yourself what your parents should have done. You're witnessing your own experience. You're validating that what you feel is real and important. You're becoming the parent you needed to have, internally. Second, you seek external witnesses, because the soul doesn't develop in isolation. It needs relationship. So you find people who can see what you feel without trying to fix it, who can be present with your pain without running from it, who can say, I see you. What you're feeling makes sense. You're not alone. This can be a therapist, could be a deeply compassionate friend, could be a support group. The important thing is that you have experiences of being seen emotionally, of expressing what you feel, and having someone hold that without minimizing, without solving, without turning away. Because every time that happens, you're receiving now what you didn't receive in childhood. And slowly, these experiences start to reprogram your core belief, the belief that your feelings are inconveniences. You start to internalize a different truth, that your feelings are important, that you matter, that it's safe to be who you are. And third, you learn to tolerate discomfort, because life is going to continue giving you uncomfortable situations. It's going to continue frustrating you, hurting you, scaring you. And if every time that happens, you run to a distraction, you'll never develop real emotional resilience. So you practice staying. When something frustrates you, instead of immediately grabbing your phone or eating or drinking, you stay with the frustration. You feel where it lives in your body. You name it, frustration, and you breathe through it, and discover that after a few minutes, it starts to pass. Because feelings always pass when you allow them to be there. And little by little, you develop a new confidence, not in life, but in yourself, in your ability to deal with whatever comes up. Because you know that you can feel and survive, that you don't need to control everything to be okay, that you can be human, messy, vulnerable, and still be fundamentally okay. This is the healing of the soul murder. It doesn't happen overnight. It's a slow process, sometimes painful, because it means feeling everything you've spent decades avoiding, all the sadness that was buried, all the anger that was suppressed, all the fear that was denied. But on the other side of that process is something you've never had, a real connection with yourself, the ability to be present in your own life, to feel joy without fearing that it will go away, to feel pain without fearing that it will destroy you, to simply be human, be real, be you. Carl Jung said that what you don't bring to consciousness manifests in your life as fate. What he meant is that until you look at these childhood wounds, they continue to drive your life. You continue choosing the same types of relationships, continuing having the same problems, continuing feeling empty no matter how much you achieve. But when you bring it to consciousness, when you look and say, my soul was murdered as a child because my parents treated my emotions as inconveniences, you regain power. You stop living on autopilot. Stop repeating patterns. Stop being controlled by wounds you didn't even know you had. And you can start to live differently, based not on what you should be, but on who you really are, with all the feelings, all the needs, all the messy and beautiful humanity that was buried for so long. If you recognized yourself in this description, if you saw your story here, comment below. Tell us how your parents treated your emotions. Because when you name it in the world, when you say it out loud, you break the isolation. You discover that millions of people are carrying this exact same wound, and that healing is possible. And if you want to understand more about how childhood patterns shape who you become, subscribe to the channel. Here, we explore the truths that Carl Jung revealed, the unconscious patterns that drive our lives, and how to bring them to consciousness, to be free. Remember this: you are not the mask you built. You are not the facade of control. Beneath it all, there's a soul. It might be buried, it might be forgotten, but it's still there, waiting to be seen, to be validated, to finally, after all these years, be allowed to simply exist.